Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Islam for Europeans. I'm your host, Robert. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Do apologize that I have not made a video in some time, but I wanted to take a look at, well, just in general, the whole dynamic of people on the anti-Islam right in the social media world, egging on the Muslims, uh, especially those who are on Muslim Twitter, and creating this kind of vicious cycle where, you know, they come with all these anti-Islam arguments, but because it's 2024, they kind of mix that in with like anti-immigration arguments in an attempt to try to cull people who are on the dissident right to have more anger towards Islam and Muslims, as opposed to mass immigration policies in general. And unfortunately, many Muslims will take the bait in this case, and instead of just attacking the argument or responding to these anti-Islam allegations, they'll go overboard and start insulting entire groups. And that all that does is you just basically fall for the trap. More and more people in the dissident right are going to pull into the anti-Islam crowd because you're not making the case that Islam is actually beneficial, for the West. So I'm going to take, one person who's well known at the anti-Islam right, who's been around for a while, and that's Lauren Southern, my fellow Canadian. Now, Lauren has always been, using a lot of these anti-Islam arguments ever since the early 2000s, but she's also, a big critic of mass immigration. And, the people always see, that the Islamophobia industry, is very lucrative, that you can make lots of money. But, Lauren is the kind of person where, she had the opportunity to make millions of dollars, but she mixes in her arguments with, anti-immigration arguments. You know, uh, like Tommy Robinson, his main thing that he attacks is basically Islam. He doesn't mind mass immigration as long as people convert out of Islam, and people don't convert to Islam, even if they're the native population. So, in this recent tweet, she basically responded to the fact that the Taliban uh, basically placed extra restrictions on women. As you know, Afghanistan was invaded by Western elites, Western powers, for and then occupied for several decades in an attempt to originally weed out Osama bin Laden, but then also to install a government that was more in line with American slash elitist interests. Right. So, this continued on and on for years. And then just recently in 2021, the Taliban came back to power. Now, this video is not an endorsement of the Taliban. I'm going to make that clear. I've never been to Afghanistan. I don't know what the situation in that region is like. So I'm not an expert when it comes to that. But what I am going to do is break down a lot of Lauren's arguments, which mixes in, like, just puts everything into a salad bowl, what the Taliban does, what certain Muslims do, and just, puts a rubber stamp on it and says, this is Islam. And again, my intention in this video is not to respond to Lauren Southern. I have an open door policy. I can talk with anybody. But, Lauren, people several times have said, let's have an honest discussion. Lauren, let's sit down and talk about these issues one by one. But, she doesn't want to do that. Given the format, she's playing to her audience. You know, uh, she goes to this feminist march, this women's rights march, and just starts, asking all these really low IQ binary choice questions that require far more nuance and, like minutes long discussion. But that's not going to happen when you have someone who's just retorting back and forth and you have all this background noise, and you're just taking little sound clips of what people say. Um, and on top of that, many of almost all of the women in the march are non-Muslim, and they pointed that out. They're pretty smart in saying, why don't you talk to a Muslim woman about this? She did find a Muslim woman in the march, and I'm going to address that. But basically, her tweet was to commemorate the Taliban's new laws passed to ban women from speaking in public, showing any skin, looking at men they aren't related to. I would like to provide this classic segment: Islam or women's rights. So, point number one, she says, the Taliban has banned women from speaking in public. So this This is actually against Islam. I don't know if people know this. In general, and I'm just talking generalities, women, Muslim women, have always spoken during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And we as Muslims, we take our information about Islam from the Quran, from the Hadith, the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions, and the first three generations of Muslims, right? Uh, so one clear piece of evidence that women can speak in public is that there's a whole chapter called Surat al-Mumtahana, or the woman who pleaded, the woman who complained to the Prophet, peace be upon him. So there was a woman during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where a man, her husband, wanted to divorce her by using a very crude statement, basically Zahar, which is, you are like the back of my mother. Uh, so she complained to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and then after that, the verse of the Quran came down saying that that she was actually correct. That a husband can't divorce his wife in this particular way, right? So just right there, the fact that she's talking to the Prophet Muhammad and he's not chastising her in any way, that right there is a clear indication that women are allowed to speak in public. Another clear evidence is the narrations of Aisha. So the Hadith are basically a compilation of the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, right? Many of his companions compiled transmitted these hadiths orally, and then they were written down. So when you see a chain of narration for each hadith, Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, has more narrations than any other companion of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So, why, if Islam was against women speaking in public, obviously she wouldn't be able to do this. There's also many a hadith where women are interacting with men in a very professional basis. Like there's one hadith where the Prophet Muhammad finishes his Friday prayer, and a woman who was listening to the prayer, she walked up to her brother and asked what he was saying, right? And he basically responded to what he was saying. So many such examples. Obviously, in Islam, we have a lot more decorum and a lot more professionalism when it comes to gender interactions. It's not like the West, or just the way that the West operates now in the 21st century. Back in the early days of early America, early Europe, there was the men and women were separated more often. So that right there, it's not. She's taking things that what the Taliban does. Say this is what Islam is, right? Second, showing any skin, and she puts any in all caps. So, um, the in Islam, like it's compulsory for Muslim women to cover their bodies, and except for the face and the hands. There's some opinions that say that the niqab, covering the whole body, including the face, is mandatory. But the general consensus from the scholars is that hijab is perfectly fine. And in some, I think in the Hanafi school of thought, sometimes they say that the feet is okay. And this is not a punishable or enforceable, I guess, rule of Islam either. There's no, from the scholars that I've listened to and I've talked to, who study, Islamic history, very in depth. There isn't any evidence that not observing the hijab correctly for women should result in a physical punishment. Now, it's a sin, just like, in Islam, we have rules. Like if a Muslim woman is not covering herself except for the face and hands, it's considered a sin. But it doesn't take you out of the fold of Islam. You're still a Muslim. I mean, we sin all the time. Muslims are sinners. We're human beings. We make mistakes. May God forgive us for not living up to those responsibilities. But to say that showing any skin in public is like something that Islam believes is not true. Now, again, like I said, this is not an endorsement of the Taliban. They have their own situation. I don't know what it's like there. You have a country that's just completely torn by war. You have groups that are mercenaries who are abusing women day and night. So I don't know what it's like, and I don't know why they implement these laws. What I do know is that this is not what they do is based on their situation and their time and place. In the West, it's going to be different because in Islam we have maxims that we hold to, that are based in the Quran and the Sunnah. One of those maxims is that harm should be avoided, right? So the third one, she says, looking at men they aren't related to. So this is, in general, I would say in Islam, this is a rule for both men and women. Uh, you know, Men are supposed to lower their gaze, women are supposed to lower their gaze. We're not supposed to ogle the opposite sex. So to say that this is just something, a restriction that is on women, um, it's only a half truth basically, and it's far more difficult for men to do this. Men are more visual, so it takes a lot more effort not to ogle women, and things like that. So like it's a two-way street. So what they many times people in the anti-Islam right do this. They'll take one thing that is basically a rule or something that women have to follow, or both men and women, and only say, well, women have to follow this. Right? So getting into the actual video itself. So another thing that Lauren said is that the punishment for rape is basically you get either killed or beaten as the woman, and this is not true either. The punishment for rape is only on the man. It's considered a form of not sedition, but banditry, right? So this falls into that category. So the punishment for sexual assault, a male on female, can range anywhere from exile to amputation to execution. For the man, women, there's no rule that they did anything wrong. Their intention was not to commit fornication. So I'm just talking generalities here. If we had like a theoretical Muslim state, right? So that's incorrect. Um, so this, it's good for us to know these things, to research these things as much as possible. Because we have no problems talking about our faith. When you have someone who's not in good faith like Laura, they're just going to go on and on and on and on. Yeah, and she also mentioned the age of Aisha. This is something that the anti-Islam right always brings up. That the Aisha was 9 years old when Prophet Muhammad consummated his marriage with her. And she actually talked with a Muslim woman. She found a Muslim woman who was there. I think she was like Daisy, and like she was actually the first statement that the sister made. She said that Islam gave women's rights 1400 years ago that Western women don't have today. This is actually true. So that's a true statement. May Allah reward her for the dawah that she's doing in this kind of intense situation where it's just feminists screaming all around, and you have Lauren Southern interviewing you. But one thing she did say was that it's not true that the Prophet Muhammad peace. Now, Lauren used basically a double statement. It's basically a double-barreled question. Was it okay for Muhammad to marry Aisha and consummate the marriage at 9 years old and beat her? Right. So let's address this as a 2-point thing. First of all, in the pre-modern era, life expectancy was extremely low. Infant mortality was extremely high. And places like, 7th century Arabia, every tribe had to have as much kids as possible, because they needed man and woman power in order for the tribe to survive. You need people who were able to get water out of wells. You need people, you need hands to, build huts. You need hands to, provide food. You need hands to hunt. You need hands to shape weapons. So the survival of the tribe is absolutely paramount, and it's like basically a daily struggle. And this was the norm all throughout human history. What I'm getting at is that every single tribe at that time, whether they were Muslim or not, this was a common practice. There were no schools back then. When people reached puberty, they got married. If you talk to any historian in any university, they will tell you that this is, the norm. In Europe, the age of marriage was like 10, 11, 12. It was just a different time back then. And to say that this was due to Islam, it doesn't, it's very disingenuous. And even people who hated Islam, from the pagan Arabs who absolutely wanted Islam wiped off the map, they never criticized the fact that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was married to Aisha. even people who are anti-Islam in Europe all the way up until the 20th century, Thomas Aquinas, Martin Luther, they never criticized Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, for marrying Aisha, right? Because it was a societal norm back in the day. Um, and Aisha was the only one who was of this age. Everyone else was older than the norm. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, married women who were widows, which was not of the norm of that day, right? And all this, as a caveat here, you know, I'm talking about things theoretically. What is in a theoretical Muslim state? How would things operate? Okay, Muslims living in the West, we have to abide by the laws of the land. We just can't create, what we think is correct if that's against the law, because a Muslim always holds to their contracts and their covenants. We, basically signed a contract or have a covenant that we are living in this country, that we should abide by the laws of this country, and as long as they don't contradict Islam, there shouldn't be any problem. So if the average age of marriage is 18 and you're marrying someone who's underage, that is against the law and you're disobeying God. You're disobeying Allah by doing that. Um, so what Lauren thinks about Islam, that we're all going to become like Afghanistan. It's just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, Muslims are only such a tiny percentage of the population, and any Muslim that gets into politics, they don't come saying, I'm going to implement Sharia law. They if they want to become members of parliament, they have to, say, I endorse, the policies of the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party or the NDP or whatever. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's just the whole format of Lauren going to this women's march, and just asking these kind of binary low IQ questions. And these women were pretty smart. I mean, they're saying, like, this is such a simplistic question, and she's just, whatever intelligent answer you give, Lauren's just going to respond back and just do some other retort, right? Oh, the second part I want to talk about was the hadith about, she's really mincing words here. They're saying that Muhammad, peace be upon him, beat Aisha. This is not true at all. He never physically abused Aisha. The hadith she's talking about is as follows, and a lot of people don't know about this. There was one instance in which Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, uh, in the early morning, like in the twilight, left his tent, while Aisha was sleeping, because he wanted to go pray, and give supplication to the people who died, the his beloved family members, right? And Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, thought that he was going out to commit fornication, to cheat on him, right? So she actually chased after him, right? And after this happened, Muhammad, peace upon him, saw that Aisha was there because she thought that he was going to cheat on him. And what he did was he had, it's called the miswak. So a miswak is basically like a toothbrush, from 7th century Arabia. It's like a twig from like a tree that people use to like clean their teeth. And he said, "Do you ever think that I would do that?" And then he basically took the toothpick and then pushed on her chest like this with the toothpick, or miswak. And that was the only time. And he was, very angry. But see how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, controlled his anger. I don't even know about the authenticity of this hadith. If it's, I have to take a look at that. But the general thing is, people will take a lot of these hadiths out of context. They don't understand the Arabic language, and then they'll make whatever conclusions they want to make. They'll mistranslate it into English, and then they'll think that this applies to all times and all situations. Right? So, and just in general, just as a caveat, um, the Muslims have been in Canada for several generations. There are coworkers, there are friends, there are family members. The fact that Lauren thinks that we're all psychopaths, that we're all beating our wives, that that Muslim women are oppressed. It's really disingenuous to think this way. I mean, you have Muslim women who are nurses, you have Muslim women who are doctors, you have Muslim women who are lawyers. Um, and it's just, I could understand maybe in the early 2000s if she was thinking this way, but the fact that Muslims have been here for so long, and that Muslim women have become integrated members of the society, it just doesn't it just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. you know like And to say that, it's Islam or women's rights, I mean, it's such a binary, question. I mean, it just, the whatever response you give, she's going to spin it in a way, that just draws more clicks and likes from her audience because, they're looking for clickbait. And, just this whole kind of like, she's just kind of playing off this whole intersectionality of, trying to convince people that, Muslims are aligned, with the left, intersectionally. And that, the fact that, Muslim women are in these marches, or that Muslim women are pro-Islam. I mean, these feminist women are actually have a positive opinion towards Islam. It's not the aha moment that she thinks it is, right? So that's the end of that argument. But on a final note, now what I'm seeing now is that a lot of people who have converted to Islam recently, they'll take these arguments, they'll spin it in a positive way. And I don't think this is the correct way either. So to say that, like, yeah, you know what, maybe women shouldn't speak in public, it's based. Uh, we need to go to the other extreme, like this super extreme red pill where it's like a reaction to feminism. We have to say women shouldn't speak at all in public, that, they should be completely covered, including the face and hands. Um, because, like, because of feminism and because birth rates have dropped so low, and because men are being persecuted, and so on and so on and so on. A lot of these Muslim converts will go into the other extreme and say, we need to do this, and I don't think this is correct either. Like, we need to take a balanced approach. We need to have an educated responses, because we want to be educated Muslims. We want to be strong in our faith, and the best way to do that is better Islamic education, right? So yeah, and one more last thing, you know, I generally shy away from responding to the people on the anti-Islam right, because it's created such a vicious cycle that I talked about. Like, they'll use these anti-Islam arguments mixed in with anti-immigration arguments. Muslims on Twitter, they'll start saying things that are basically gloating over white women being raped, and like gloating over you know uh, women being attacked, and gloating over all these things, and just saying things that are just so over the top, that all it does is you get people from the dissident right to unite with the people on the anti-Islam right, and that's the trap, and we shouldn't fall for that trap. Um, and it's just wide, because the results of that are very dangerous, because they're going to end up going to the same marches. They're going to end up agreeing on the same things on Twitter. They're going to end up voting for the same political parties. And, all this opportunity to separate these two groups, because their thoughts on Islam vary. This is, a golden opportunity that we can't afford to squander in 2024. So that's why I shy away from, like, these kind of arguments and debates. I do think it's important to have these like discussions, for our own educational purposes. But if all you're going to interact with and discuss with is haters, as most people who are in the online dawa scene try to get into, they just get into this trap where the only people you're discussing with are absolutely despise Islam, and you're never going to be able to change their opinion. It's like talking to a brick wall, and you start to think that that the whole society functions this way. There's many people who are neutral, who are on the fence, who if you give them a fair shake, they may have they may change their mind on Islam. And that includes people in the dissident right. But that's the paradox. The more you try to your main interlocutors are your David Woods and your Jordan Petersons and your Lawrence Southerns, you're going to start to think that every single Westerner, A, hates Islam, and B, is not going to change their mind on Islam, and C, you're going to start to think, what's the point of even trying to reason with them? I'm just going to go even farther and accelerate, and just turn into a racial argument, turn into a civilizational argument, turning into an us versus them argument, and that's not the direction we want to take things. Right, so that's enough of my uh, my rant for today. Please like and subscribe to Islam for Europeans. I will make some more content soon, inshallah. And yeah, I'm your host, Robert. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.